and we are defying book deserts today. So we're teaming up.
You're good. You're good.
Excellent. Good morning, everybody. Hey, this is Tony Diaz and Librotraficante live here in Califas. We're in East Palo Alto. I am with, and I love saying this, not just because my tocayo, Antonio López, my tocayo. However, poet, city councilman. That is awesome, hermano.
Yeah, man. One day at a time.
Awesome,
One day at a time, man.
Wonderful to see you.
Likewise, it's been too long, man.
Too long. And y'all in for a treat because he's going to flow for us. But I want you to know, he's gone from workshopping poems to workshopping cities.
That's it. That's it, man. We got some exciting growing developments in the city. We're trying to get our infrastructure right, our libraries right, our education system right. I love this community, but we definitely are 3 laps behind in Silicon Valley. So part of the work is encouraging people to say, we got to break those barriers, aspire to be better. Many of our families are immigrants or from different communities of color. So we're just out here, man, trying to not just survive, but thrive, brother.
I love it. So we're also here with our friend, Jacqueline García, who's behind us. She's got some banned books. So we have some contraband prose that we're going to be donating for one of our new allies. We are in middle school here. We're actually behind them in the garden, community garden. We'll be donating books. We want to keep donating books. So shout outs to Tia Chucha Centro Cultural and Bookstore and the Latino Bookstore in San Antonio at the Guadalupe Cultural Arts Center, where people will be donating books on a continual basis to keep their books thriving here. Because I want to point something out. Yes, Texas, shame on us for having too many book bans. But there's another way that our community sciences in book desert. So it takes all of us to come together to address that. We're also going to be working with a community center as they expand and add a library to their components. So we're all coming together for that. But I do want to just really take time to talk to our familia out here in Califas to kind of compare some of the things that happen here that also happen in Texas, but how we can really, really unite. But first, tell folks about yourself, Antonio, because you're from this barrio.
Yep. That's right, man.
And I'm so proud of you, not just because you're an awesome poet. We got to meet through Mocondo.
Yep.
Pero mira, mano, I tell people, when you tell folks your trajectory, you could be banking. You could be making like 6 figures a month, probably. But you came back to give back to your community. So tell us about your trajectory in the barrio.
Sure, man. I was born and raised here in East Palo Alto. We're 2.5 square miles, 30,000 people. We got a lot of infamy back in the days, being the quote-unquote murder capital, right, in 92. I grew up in 94. So definitely, I tell people, like, I'm young enough to see the change, but old enough to remember how bad it was. My folks are Mexican immigrants. They came here in the 80s. My dad was doing farm work in the beginning, and under the Reagan amnesty bill, he was able to get amnesty. My mom shortly joined after. They're from like a small pueblo, one church, one padre, like 1,000 people. She was his neighbor, like down the street, you know. And then they come here to East Palo Alto and they think, oh, like California, prosperity, American dream. And soon they figure out, like, there's no supermarkets here. There's a library's messed up here. It's hard to breathe out here. You got to close your windows. And so, you know, I remember growing up, like, my mom had to push us through strollers to go get groceries in Palo Alto, man. There wasn't any supermarkets growing up. So it's definitely been a struggle. And that's the kind of stuff you can't put a price on. And that's why I can't really see myself in the silk suit industry. You know, I got this at Ross in 1499. So I'm proud of where I'm from. And I love our humility as a people. And I think at this point in my time, you know, I went to my middle school and public school, K through 8, Edison McNair, Edison Brightwood, shout out. Public school. Then I went to a prep school, and it was this whole culture shock, brother. Like, but it kicked my butt in a way that prepared me for the bigger world. Because growing up, I just knew East Palo Alto. I didn't go to the fancy cities in Atherton or Hillsboro or Menlo Park. Like, this was my hood. And I didn't have a reason to go outside of it, let alone transportation. And so I started to really invest in my own education. And so I went to Duke, I went to Oxford, I went to these different universities. And then I came back in the middle of the pandemic after 8 years. And I realized that if I'm so educado, like, what are we going to do as people in the Latino community who've reached the top of the pyramid, like you wrote about? We've been able to reach the pinnacles of success, but it's not about us. How do we know our lane and role to serve others? And so in 2020, during the pandemic, I had this like shot to the heart and said, okay, so what are you going to do for your community? How are you going to give back? And I saw that there were 3 open seats for the council. And I wanted to see, as a young person, there wasn't any young people in the council at that time.
Wow.
A lot of folks who are seasoned, and that's great. But we want, you know, the city's young. So we need a political vision that marries the old and the new, because that's what Silicon Valley is. Silicon Valley is always trying to update us, always trying to displace us. So you need to be on your toes to be like, all right, like, if the iPhone's not gonna have me in it, how can I be in the iPhone? You know, like, how do we? And that's what art is. Art is innovating. Art is imagining the impossible. Art is educating us on how we can plant seeds. So yeah, man, that's my background. Born and raised.
No, y mira, le digo a los parientes, si tienen miedo que sus hijos se convierten a poetas, quiero que ustedes sepan que también pueden hacer algo muy útil.
Yeah, exactly. And that's part of the immigrant mentality too. Like, we survive so much. Que sean ingenieros o doctores and abogados, and you're forgetting, well, what about the richness of the culture? Who's gonna take care of that? Who's gonna be a steward of that? Because otherwise, what happens? We get a 6-figure salary, we end up in these corporate jobs, but then we lose who we are. Exactly. So we need to make sure that through culture and art and education, we can still survive, but also not sacrifice ourselves in the process. You know?
That's awesome. So that's awesome. Well, we're gonna bring him back in a little bit. We're gonna share the mic now with Jackie, but I want folks to know this is the facility of language, el cariño para la comunidad, and the intelligence and attitude that we really admire. You're gonna hear him flowing a little bit. Not yet, in a little bit. So stay tuned. And of course, I want to remind folks as we switch the microphone. So I'm gonna take this from you and hand that to me. Hand that to Jackie. Gracias. I want to remind folks that, of course, this is a multi-platform broadcast. Not only are you watching it right now on social media, the video will air on fox26houston.com. The audio will air on 90.1 FM KPFT, Houston's community station. And I want to remind our listeners, please keep in mind that KPFT is a community station. So if you can budget a donation to the station, please do so we can do our part to keep this great experiment in freedom of speech going. You can go to kpft.org and make a donation in the name of Nuestra Palabra, Latino writers having their say. But of course, we also come to you in person. That's what I love about our crew. We are not in a sanitized studio. It's not that easy to just set up shop everywhere. So I want to give a shout out to our crew right now. Liana López, Librotraficante, working the computer right now. She's basically sitting down on the side of the broadcasting across the country, and with a lot of grace and style. So she's making us convey some great information and moving that camera on. It's not happening magically. It's not a drone. That's high-tech Aztec. Brian Parras, doing what he does. And of course, mira, Texas, no se pongan celosos. There's a rumor that we came here to seek political asylum from Texas, okay? On a beautiful morning like this with great people, it's tempting. But no se pongan celosos, Texas. We have a lot of work to do. We got an election coming up November. We're going back, okay? Energized with friends. Our mission is in Texas. We will be back, so no se preocupen. So shout out to the crew holding it down on the ground out there. We got Roxana Guzman, who's our multimedia producer, Rodrigo Bravo, our audio producer, Mark Anthony Piñon working our graphics. And then, of course, I still got to mention the other two co-founders of the Librotraficante Caravan, Lara Acosta and Lupe Mendez, who is the Texas Poet Laureate. But we got new friends and family now. She's great at getting the contraband books, okay? Our dear friend, Jacqueline Garcia, she donated to our caravan of banned books to Austin. So thank you already before.
You're so welcome.
And it's great to convene in person because we go to where the gente are. Yeah. And look at this whole new, this is a sampling.
This is a sampling.
Of
Un poquito de mucho.
Of the contraband mind-altering prose that you got in the car that we're going to donate to the school behind us.
That's right.
We'll find out more about the school, but tell us about this big haul of contraband books and who helped you get these.
So I put out the call on social media. You know, social media gets a bad rap, but social media is also the way that we get the word out, right? So I put it out on social media. I am collecting banned books, books from Latino, Hispanic, Latinx authors, and we just want to make sure that these books get into the hands of the kids who need them.
Beautiful. And of course, I gotta mention some of these books. So shout out to Tejano. Our friend Benjamin L.A. Signs, Aristotle and Dante discovered the secrets of the universe. I got to remind Tejas, we should be ashamed. Over 1,600 books banned in Tejas. And of course, you had a state rep, I'm not going to say his name, who came up with a list of 800 books to ban at a time. Benjamin was on that list. Amazing book. So happy that this is going to this school.
Yeah, for sure.
And then
Yeah.
one other shout out of Darkness, Ashley Hope Bettis. Fantastic book. Our friend Cristina Granados is holding it down in Fredericksburg. We did one of our banned books, Caravans was to Fredericksburg, where they banned this book.
I know. I know. And here's the thing about books. We'll let this helicopter plane airplane go by. It's such a beautiful day here. I even want to get up into the sky and look at the view. But you know, we're talking about art a little bit ago, and literature is art, right? And so it is so important. Storytelling is so powerful. And it is important that it represents the people who have been long underrepresented. Right? For me, growing up, you know, I did not speak English till I was 6 years old. My Spanish is my first language, and so all of the books that my mom and dad would get to me were in Spanish, and they were stories about people just like me and people just like my family. And then when I got to school, there were no books in the library that were about people like me or people in my family, or the struggles that we went through to get to this country. So I just think it's so important for kids to be able to see themselves in these books. And one of the other things that we don't think about is the overrepresented. And how important it is actually for them to also read these books, right? Because then they can see outside of their experience and understand, you know, what their friends have gone through, what their friends' families have gone through, the neighborhoods that they might be living in, people from other places. Again, storytelling is such a powerful thing. You know, it's not all mermaids are white. If you believe in mermaids, right? Like they might be brown too. So just saying. But it's the representation of different characters and books and different stories that make us all richer as a human.
And I want to acknowledge some more of the books that you're bringing. Matt de la Peña, of course, Mexican White Boy. And Matt was actually part of the curriculum that was banned in Tucson, Arizona. And I should point out, we're in California to commemorate the 10-year anniversary of the Librotraficante caravan. And we want to remind people that was overturned. I do write about it in my new book, The Tip of the Pyramid, Cultivating Community Cultural Capital. But don't mistake this for just a recapitulation of that, because the oppressors have studied what we did, and they're updating how to erase our voices and keep books out of the hands of our community. So we also want to thank Sacramento State University, Professor Dale Allender. They've got a grant to the Comprometidos. It's a federal grant helping Hispanic serving institutions. So we've been visiting several spots here in California, but we're teaming up with different groups to get books in the community, including a community center that's expanding. So this is the beginning. We want people to be donating either to Librotraficante, Nuestra Palabra. We'll make sure that Jackie is aware of other folks that want to give books, just to keep the books flowing. And we'll check in on a regular basis, year long as well. I want to ask you about the school, but let's put this in context. So we're in Silicon Valley, and I tell you what, in my cliche brain, by the way, industrial traffic above us, people might not think that this is what Silicon Valley looks like. So break it down where we're at. Where are we exactly?
We are in East Palo Alto. We're probably a mile away from Facebook. Facebook is right on down that way. Google, probably another 4 to 5 miles to the south of us. There's a lot of wealth all around what is EPA, or East Palo Alto. East Palo Alto is this little pocket, and it seems to be shrinking by the day because people get displaced by these big tech companies. People come and, they buy $750,000 homes in East Palo Alto, and that just raises the price on everything else, right? So, it's not what you think of when you think of Silicon Valley. There are still pockets all around the Bay Area that are on the fringe and they're marginalized. And this is one of those communities.
And they need resources, and we're happy to team up.
Absolutely.
And I think behind us is the community garden for
It's
the
it's
school.
it's a garden for the school. Yeah, went up a few years back. Kids work in it and on it, and there's community days where the community comes out and also helps in the garden. So that's super awesome.
And for discretion, we're not going to name the school too, but we are going to be supporting them throughout this time, and we'll be handing the books to them in just a little bit. And the idea will be to keep getting books into this community. So next up, then we're telling people where we're at.
Yep.
We're telling them we're going to continue teaming up.
That's right.
Let's show them what happens then. So I'm going to ask you to take your mic and give it to Antonio. So what happens when you put books about students into the hands of students? What happens to that imagination? What could the possibilities be? We're about to hear someone that has taken those verbal skills, community, with those books, that literature. I got to meet Antonio López, author of Gentification, brilliant book of poems that we're going to make sure is always in stock at the Latino bookstore in San Antonio at the Guadalupe Cultural Arts Center. I'm proud to be a literary curator there. Shout out to the director, Cristina Bailly, who always wants this sort of material at the tips of the hands of our gente. I want people to know, too, if you are a parent at Breckenridge Middle School, across the street from the Guadalupe Cultural Arts Center Latino bookstore, we're having a special tour, and we usually have our first Friday readings. Those Thursdays, parents, I come to the school, walk you across the street, you get a free tour, little pan dulce, free books at the end. Why? Because we want this to happen. So, hey, Antonio, by day, mandas con tus palabras.
That's right. That's right.
You know, you contract the words by day, you liberate them at night. Tell people the name of your book and tell us what you're going to flow about right now.
So, my book is called Gentification, and it's this book that basically is kind of like a syllabus. So, a lot of times, here's the idea. A lot of our comunidad, our aspirations, well, first it was when I was growing up. It wasn't like getting in a gang. It wasn't getting caught up. Our mothers wanted to see come home at night. But then we started to really aspire to be something better, and now our community is about going to higher education. And that's a beautiful thing, being a first-generation college kid. But a lot of the times the narrative doesn't have to stop there, because once we get into those universities, it's still a struggle. We deal with culture shock. We deal with trying to not to assimilate. We deal with trying to blend in. We deal with not having the resources to be as preparado as our other classmates, right? So the idea of gentrification, you can hear gentrification, and I spoke about this in your radio program a little while back. But when you deal with things like there's noise on the airplane, or you have a city that's redlined, you have a city that's been, in Palo Alto in the 1950s, our city was cut in half, and we lost 50 businesses. So we didn't have any tax base. We didn't have any small entrepreneurs. And so when you inherit a structure of racism and redlining, what do you do? What do you do as an artist? It's like a chef. You have these ingredients. You don't have the best ingredients. They could be expired. You could be missing a few things. But still, you have to make bread to feed your community. And so as an artist, as a Latino artist, it is my belief that is basically our political philosophy. That we come from a tradition of not having it all, of coming from scratch, adaptando, conformando, right? There's like a Camaleón song. You have to always blend in to your surroundings. And so gentrification takes this idea of gentrification, of saying there is no doubt that Facebook, Google, Microsoft is putting pressure on our community to not live here anymore. So how, as an artist, do you keep expanding the imagination of a people that are so struggled with week to week, getting diapers, getting their unemployment check, going through child support, living multiple families in a single family home, which is how I grew up as a kid. We had our uncles live in the garage. Very common in East Palo Alto, because you have houses $1 million plus. So gentrification is this thesis of mine, if you will, that says, you know what? We have to invade language itself. We have to take English and we have to re-gentify it. We have to make it, we have to claim it, make it our own, hotwire it if it was like a car. And you have to joyride through it. You have to understand that, yes, like there will be pain, there will be struggle, there will be times when we don't know if we're gonna be able to be okay. But art and literature will always be able to liberate us, because it will always remind us there is something more in the horizon. And so the little spiff I'm giving today is just about my testimonial that I didn't imagine a world of politics. I didn't imagine that I would run for office or get involved in policy, but poetry always gave me the capacity to imagine something better for myself and my community. So what I'm writing about right now, after gentrification, on my second book, it's talking about me as a middle school kid. Because what you realize, Tocayo, is that when you do policy, some things change, a lot of things don't change. And time feels Aztec, it's cyclical. A lot of the things that you dealt with in the 60s, you deal with now or in the 80s. So when we talk about violence or at-risk kids or kids getting caught up in gangs in the system, which I'm writing about right now, I'm going through my memories and talking about how can I use those struggles of trauma and storytelling, but put them in a way that people can feel empowered. It's not just something that you get pummeled over in a headline, which is something in East Palo Alto. You know, a lot of the press was negative back in the day. It's slowly changing, but we have to be a part of that change and use stories and use literature and use narratives which allow us to feel we're part of the change and not being swept by it.
That's awesome, man.
Yeah, man.
That's powerful.
Yeah, gracias.
Powerful.
Gracias, man.
So you're working on the second book now.
That's right. Working on the second book. I have a tentative title, Hoodlandia. And I'll tell you why, because as a kid, I'll tell you something. So we don't have Disney World like in Florida. We have Disneyland in Anaheim. Right. And as Latinos, we always Hispanicize words, right? So like la tele, you know, la troca, el carro, right? It's kind of a bastardizing, if you will, but I don't think of it that way. It's remixing, right? It's Spanglifying. So Disney was Disneylandia. Right. And so the idea of East Palo Alto is you have a community which is historically African-American, which has its bones in civil rights struggle, in nationalist movements, the Chicano movement, the Black Power movement. And now it's something else now. So it's a hood, but it's also $1 million hood. It's also an expensive hood. So it doesn't quite make sense. Mm-hmm. So Hoodlandia is kind of this word I coined. I always coin words. This word I coined, which is like, it is a Latino hood, but it's also something more than that. It is Silicon Valley. It is the Stanford Shopping Center. It's Google. It's Microsoft. It's also violence. It's also beauty. I mean, it's everything. It's humanity. This is my humanity, Tony. Like, this is where I grew up. I went to these streets. I went to the church over there. I probably got my, I probably got my, first kiss somewhere, being all cheesy like that. And algo más, pero this is where I became a young dude. And yet, a lot of my classmates ya no están aquí. Se mudaron a Modesto, se mudaron a Stockton. So I got this like herida in me. I got this hole in me. It's like, where are the homeboys I grew up with? I don't know where they are. They got priced out or worse. And so we use art to heal ourselves, but then we use art to heal others. But it starts with you. And so what I tell your listeners today is that if you have a child and you see him acting up, try introducing them to a library or a book club or a mentorship, right? Because a lot of times those things are cries for help, that we don't have the language to articulate. We're frustrated that they can't find a place to do homework or safely go to a park or imagine. What do you do with the energy? What do you do with all that frustration? Growing up, and like if you walk half a mile down, you'll see a cul-de-sac on O'Connor where all these cars are piled up. You hear parakeets, you hear people with multiple cars, and then literally a stone's throw after that, when you get to the trail, you'll see Palo Alto's golf course, right? So I grew up seeing the disparity in front of my face all the time, and so you can't be surprised that you have a generation that's my age who feels like this place ain't for them anymore. And so as poetas, as artistas, we're in the business of fighting back against the banning, against the silent banning, against the displacement, against the trafficking of an imagination, which says there's no place for you. So aquí estamos, man. Aquí estamos. Escribiendo la resistencia, man. Writing that resistance.
Love it. So in closing, I'd like to bring Jackie back up here. I'm going to share the mic, but I want to kind of draw some parallels of what's going on in Tejas, because you mentioned that this used to be an unincorporated area. Of course, if we think about Houston, Aldine is right next to Houston, unincorporated, and the complications are that if you're unincorporated, who do you call about those airplanes? You don't have a city councilman, you don't have a mayor.
Can't raise taxes.
So tell us a little bit about that, and then your experience too with the city. Brian, will I need to pass the mic back and forth?
No, I think it's actually using the mic on the phone, so we're good.
Sounds good. So tell us how this went from being unincorporated to a city.
There was a big divide in the community but there was this belief that, first of all, we didn't have our own police department. So we had the sheriffs coming from San Mateo, didn't know who we were. They might harassing us, intimidating us, feeling like they weren't a part of the community. we had white folks leaving the 60s, and that weakened our tax base. So you have all these kids of color who are going to dilapidated schools. The streets aren't paved. There's not enough water for the community. And so at some point, we said, as a community, we have to control our own destiny. And there was a movement in the 80s and in the late 70s to incorporate, to become part of the San Mateo County. Very controversial. It won by only 15 votes.
Wow.
15 votes. Because the belief was, and here's the fear factor, people are afraid of change so often as communities of color because change has always been negative, largely negative. When you tell someone things are going to change, they're always worried about, am I going to get kicked out? And so you're asking a community to vastly change its governance structure. And we did that successfully. But we've been around for 39 years, and it's been a struggle for us to bring businesses in here, to maintain an affordable standard of living because of our location, to pave the streets, to improve our schools. 57% of our estudiantes here in East Palo Alto go outside of the city for school. Right?
Wow.
More than half, because it is the belief of the parents that these schools are inferior. And so part of the change is breaking the cycle in ourselves of investing in ourselves. Because maybe it won't be today, but at some future, we need to be autonomous and not rely on people of other means to give us the resources we need. And so that's the story of incorporation, brother. It's about we became politically independent 39 years ago, but we have yet to become economically independent, educationally independent. Culturally, I think we've always been a bastion of richness, pero economics is the name of the game, ya sabes, in Silicon Valley. And we are still in the growing pains of being in a position to advocate for ourselves.
Well, we're glad, though, that you're here being able to try to take advantage of the moment, guide the moment, and to also help shape your destiny. So what are your insights into some of this?
I mean, it's, as I'm hearing him speak about East Palo Alto, I think about growing up on the east side of Los Angeles and now living on the east side of San Jose in the Bay Area. And it's so striking to me, the similarities and the parallels, right? Because same, not a whole lot of investment in the community, not a whole lot of investment in schools. Growing up in a book desert, East Los Angeles. A lot of the students in East San Jose also do not go to school in East San Jose. They go elsewhere to school because, again, the parents in East San Jose feel the same way that the parents in East Palo Alto feel, which is, well, these schools aren't good. And so, and then it's almost like you manifest that, right? Because if people leave those schools, then those schools aren't getting the investment that they need. And so it's this cycle. I'm not sure what it is about East Side. I don't know why people are afraid of the East. That's where the sun rises, so it's good. But yeah, I think I hear him and I can so relate to this divestment or lack of investment in these communities that are so rich in so many ways, and whose richness can actually enrich the outer communities too. So yeah, yeah.
Well, I tell you what, in closing, I want to get one last quote from both of you, because there's some things that our listeners will be like, that's depressing. Yeah. But we should be empowered as well, because we're doing something about it. Here we are. We have the ability to shape our day, to come out here. We want to thank you both for coming out to our studio, which is in the middle of the la gente, and breaking stereotypes. But to me, that's exciting. And we're planting seeds with your work, these books. So close us out, Antonio. Tell us why we are excited and fired up.
Because California is becoming a place where the next generation of leadership is more Latino, is more progressive, is open-minded, wants to fight for reproductive rights, doesn't want to ban books, wants more books, right? We're in the business of preparing for the future. And yes, there are people in the world who don't want to see us in power, but there's enough of us, there's enough of us to shine the light and make a difference in our communities. And we're not afraid, because we come from people who had to look both ways crossing the street, in the middle of the streets, to survive. So you're telling me putting on a suit and a Diaz and fighting for 2 hours, that's not going to scare me. So we have it in our blood to adapt, to survive, to flourish. And so I see all this with a deep sense of optimism, because I know I look at you, I look at Jackie, I look at this crew, And we know that the portrait of ourselves is more beautiful and the world sees it. And it is our job to shine that light back. And I will do my role in La Politica, your role at the top of the pyramid with radio and media and art. And Jackie, her role in East San Jose. And together we're going to build this beautiful mosaic of what the future is. It's us.
I love it. I love it. That's awesome. Thank you, brother. Thank you. Jackie, Jackie,
take us home.
Take us home.
You know, for me, what inspires me is children and youth, and especially Hispanic youth. You know, I'm a Hispanic, Latina, Latinx, Cubanita. And, you know, I just really feel like children right now, the next generation coming up, like they are proud of who they are. Mm-hmm. They want to be seen. They want to be heard. We are here. We are proud. We are loud. Yeah. And we're not going to be quiet.
Love it.
And it's my job as, you know, getting up there in age, becoming an elder, to shine the spotlight on that generation, to help that generation with philanthropic means, right? Give them all of the support that I can to make sure that they get to where they need to be.
That's awesome. Well, thanks for all that you do. Really appreciate it. Hey, on behalf of the whole crew and all the Librotraficantes in Texas, Califas, uniting. Thanks for tuning in. This is Tony Diaz, Librotraficante. We're going to catch you somewhere else. Pick up a book and support the community. Thanks, guys. Nos vemos.